Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Transformers TCG Deck Techs, where we dare to think outside the box and we have fun doing it. My name is Jimmy, and if you haven't guessed, we're going to go back and revisit my very first video, and we're going to see if we can update Skywarp's Lazarus. You know, it's the deck that got me started on everything, and, you know, it holds a special place since good old Skywarp is my favorite seeker. But the reason why I'm doing this is because at Gen Con, I ran into the guys at Vector Sigma, and Mark Kinney asked me, when am I going to update Skywarp's Lazarus? So I decided to take some time and see if I could make the deck better, and I believe I have. You know, maybe add some cards from Wave 3, which I have. But the starting lineup is just a little bit different from the original Skywarp's Lazarus, and I just think it works a lot better. I have tried many different combinations of characters over the past few weeks, and nothing really seemed to pan out until this group of characters. But I have been playing a lot on Octagon, playtesting the deck, seeing what changes need to be made. And I wanted to send a special shout out to Jake Corbin. He's on the Facebook group, and he is one of my subscribers. And he has been helping me out a lot. I talk to him every day about Transformers, and you know, he's actually keeping things fresh for me. And he's really been a huge help. So thanks again, Jake, for everything that you've done so far. And I look forward to playing more games on Octagon with you. But in any event, let's go ahead and take a look at the new Skywarp's Lazarus. Okay, before I show you the new team, I thought I would go back and reference what the original team was with the original version of Skywarp's Lazarus. And the deck revolves around Skywarp from Wave 2. And his alt mode ability reads, when you flip to this mode, return a card that has no battle icons from your scrap pile to hand. And there was one card that I immediately thought of when I saw that ability, and that was I Still Function. And it's an action that reads, return one of your KO'd characters that has 12 stars or fewer to the battlefield and repair 1 damage from it. At the end of turn, KO it. So this has no battle icons. So we can actually get it back with Skywarp's ability. And, you know, just playing I Still Function one time during a game can really turn things in your favor. But I thought, you know, what would happen if you played it multiple times in a game? So that's what the idea was, you know, using Skywarp's ability to constantly play and get back I Still Function. And his other ability also revolves around cards with no battle icons. And it reads, once per turn, when you play or flip a battle card that has no battle icons, this gets +3 attack and +3 defense until end of turn. So if you don't manage to play a card that has no battle icons, you can still try to flip one to get that +3 attack. The +3 defense doesn't really come into play too often, but for whatever reason, it does seem to come into the clutch when we're defending, and occasionally we do flip non-icon cards on defense. So sometimes it'll come into play, but we're primarily looking at that +3 attack. Now with I Still Function, I was trying to find characters that would work well with it and, you know, still fit into the, you know, star restrictions of the deck. And the first character that I thought of was Ransack from Wave 1. Now his alt mode ability doesn't come into play at all in this deck. I mean, you might play it once or twice over the course of, you know, several weeks of playing the deck, but the alt mode ability says when you flip to this mode, move 2 damage counters from another character to this one. So if for whatever reason you feel that you need to heal one of your guys for 2, you know, just bring it back to Ransack, because we want him to be damaged. And the reason we want him to be damaged is, in his bot mode side, he has an ability that reads, this character's attack is equal to the number of damage counters on him. Now, with I Still Function, when you bring back Ransack, if he's in bot mode, he automatically has 7 damage counters on him. So his attack value base is going to be 7. I just thought that that was really nutty because he's only 6 stars. So we're going to have plenty of room to, you know, play with our, you know, remaining star count. So these two guys were 16 stars altogether. So I had 9 stars to mess with. And after looking at all of the characters, I kind of settled on Insecticon Skrapnel from Wave 1. I mean, he's just really strong to mitigate damage, but his alt mode ability actually comes in quite a bit, also in conjunction with Ice Still Function. And it reads, when you flip to this mode, you may KO one of your Insecticons. If you do, tap an enemy that has 13 stars or fewer. So you can actually flip Skrapnel, KO Ransack, play I Still Function, bring back Ransack, and attack the character that you just tapped. That's really insane to me. And it has been pretty cool to see it in action. But his other ability in bot mode is really why I had him in the deck. And it reads, this can't take more than 3 attack damage from a single target. So, you know, I'm in a pretty aggro-heavy meta here locally in Indianapolis and Greenwood. But, you know, this does come into play against blue decks as well, especially against, like, you know, Optimus Prime decks or, you know, any decks that have, you know, heavy hitters in them. But this combination of characters was performing fairly well. But Mark Kinney found the same problem with the deck that I have, and that is, you know, the flipping in this deck is kind of clunky because you want Ransack in this mode, you want Skywarp in this mode, you want Skrapnel in this mode, but it's like, you know, when you're playing I Still Function, you know, you want to flip Skywarp, grab it from the scrap pile, and you play it. Well, if Ransack's not in this mode or Skrapnel's not in this mode so that you can flip him to use his ability on himself or, you know, Ransack or whatever, it just doesn't flow correctly. So I went back and re-examined the team, and I've been playing all sorts of different teams with this. I was kind of worried that, you know, Ransack was going to get the boot for whatever reason because some of the characters that I was using were 10 stars. But thankfully, Ransack is staying. Obviously, Skywarp is staying. So unfortunately, Skrapnel is the odd man out. Now, I didn't get rid of him completely. He's actually in the sideboard of this deck because he works really well against aggro decks. But unfortunately, he does kind of fall flat against defensive decks. So we're going to go ahead and move him out to the sideboard. And we're going to introduce the new addition to the team. And that is Wave 1 Wheeljack. And Wheeljack has an ability in alt mode that says when you upgrade one of your cars, which this is the only car, so whenever you upgrade one of your cars, draw a card, then scrap a card from your hand. So this is actually going to enable his bot mode ability, which reads, while you have a weapon in your scrap pile, this has bold 3. And that's really insane because, you know, even with just a base attack of 5, bold 3 can, you know, catapult him up to like, you know, 11, 12 damage without upgrades. It gets kind of insane, but, you know, imagine throwing a weapon on him and, you know, playing Supercharge. His damage is just incredible. So I felt that Wheeljack being 9 stars, so I'm at 25 stars altogether, just seemed to perform really, really, really well. So that is the updated team. And now we're going to take a look at the battle cards. Okay, so the first battle cards that I'm going to show you are the battle cards that have no icons on them. You know, we are playing a deck that's focused around Skywarp from Wave 2, so we need cards with no battle icons so he'll work properly. But I only have 6 cards in the deck that have no icons on them. Through playtesting, I just found that if I had more than 6, I was flipping them too often when I was attacking, so my offense was suffering. But then, you know, I found that if I had less than 6, I just wasn't seeing them as often as I needed to. So the first card that we'll look at, you know, obviously we've already seen this one, but it's I Still Function. You know, this is the most important card in the deck. You know, playing this one time, you know, over the course of a game will really turn things in your favor. But playing it multiple times is just insane. But I've already read it, but I'll go ahead and read it again. It's an action that says return one of your KO'd characters that has 12 stars or fewer to the battlefield and repair 1 damage from it. At the end of turn, KO it. So that's just nutty. We play this on Ransack early game. We play this on Wheeljack late game. We're going to be causing a lot of problems. But because we want to see this as often as possible, I put 3 copies of I Still Function in the deck. And the next card is the EM24 IR Laser Launcher. It's an upgrade weapon that gives us +3 attack, and it also has no battle icons. And because this is a weapon that sticks around that gives us +3 attack, that's really awesome. And not having battle icons is normally a downside to this card, but because we are playing Skywarp from Wave 2, we can, use that to a great benefit because we, can get these back with Skywarp. If we flip this while we're battling with Skywarp, he'll get +3 damage. But what's really cool is if we play this on Skywarp while he's in bot mode, not only do we get the +3 attack from this weapon, but we also get the +3 attack from his ability. So this is basically just saying, here, +6. So that's really awesome. But, because I'm trying to limit my cards that have no battle icons to 6, and I wanted to add 1 copy of another card, we just put 2 copies of EM24 IR Laser Launcher in the deck. And the last card that has no battle icons is Steamroll. And it's an action that says choose one of your characters. When it does more than enough attack damage to KO an enemy this turn, your opponent chooses one of their other characters and puts the extra damage on it. Or really what this says is choose one of your characters and turn it into Grimlock from Wave 1. But one of the things that we want to make sure that we're not doing in a super aggressive deck is wasting damage. There's nothing worse than being forced to attack into a character that has very few health remaining, with one of our characters that we know can deal a ton of damage. But we don't want to see this, too early. Definitely don't want to see this in our opening hand because early game, our opponent's characters aren't really going to be having a lot of damage on them already. So we want to try to get the best use out of this card as possible. But we can also get this back with Skywarp if it ever ends up in our scrap pile. So we just really need just the 1 copy. Okay, so the next couple cards we're going to look at are going to help us make sure that we see these cards as often as possible. And the first card is Treasure Hunt. And it's an action that says scrap the top 4 cards of your deck, put all upgrades scrapped this way into your hand. And this was actually just added yesterday. Somebody made a good point that even if I am, scrapping the actions and not putting them in my hand, that's still going to be getting me closer to I Still Function and Steamroll. And if those actions end up being I Still Function or Steamroll, then I can just get them back with Skywarp. So that's actually pretty cool. But then I also thought, well, maybe this card isn't great with Wheeljack because I'm putting the upgrades in my hand rather than into my scrap pile to, get him online. But after playing with the card for a little bit, I found that that's not an issue at all. But this card is really good. I mean, it's just really strong for this deck. So I put 3 copies of Treasure Hunt in the deck. And the next card is Incoming Transmission. And it's an action that says draw 2 cards, then put a card from your hand on top of your deck. This is just really solid, and if we have a card that has an orange icon in our hand that we don't necessarily need, we can put that on top of our deck and make sure that we, are flipping at least 1 orange during our attack. But I only put 2 copies of Incoming Transmission in the deck because while drawing cards is good, I mean, it just is, we don't want to be spending all of our time drawing cards. We want to be, having cards that, deal damage in our deck rather than just drawing cards so that we can, keep the damage flowing. Okay, so the next cards that we're going to look at are more geared towards Wheeljack. I mean, obviously we can play weapons on anybody that we want, but Wheeljack really likes his weapons. So the first card that we'll look at is Erratic Lightning. And it's a weapon that gives our character +3 attack and -1 defense. And like a lot of the cards in this deck, this card has a downside, and it's that -1 defense. But in this particular deck, we don't really mind if a couple of our characters get knocked out because we're playing I Still Function a lot. So, we're trying to minimize the downsides to the cards in this particular deck. And, having a +3 attack weapon that sticks around is awesome. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of Erratic Lightning in the deck. The next card is Grenade Launcher. And it's a +4 weapon, but unfortunately it doesn't stick around. It says after the upgraded character attacks, we scrap this card. Now again, this card is a +4 weapon, and the downside is that we have to scrap it so it doesn't stick around. Well, in this particular deck, that downside is not that bad, because there will be times in the game where, we have either just recently reshuffled our deck, or it's really early in the game, and we don't necessarily have weapons in our scrap pile to bring Wheeljack online. Well, this is actually going to help us with that. Because if we play this on one of our other characters, and we attack with that character, this is going to end up in the scrap pile. And since it's a weapon, it's going to bring Wheeljack online. So I put 3 copies of Grenade Launcher in the deck. I mean, it's just too strong with that +4. And the next card, which works along the same lines, not exactly, but has a very similar effect, is Power Punch. And it's an upgrade weapon that gives us Bold 3. And then after the upgraded character attacks, we scrap this card. So it works very similarly in the way that Grenade Launcher will scrap itself and help us make sure that Wheeljack is online. But this works particularly well with Skywarp because we're not always going to be able to play a card from our hand that has no battle icons. So Skywarp is a prime target for this because we can still attempt to flip a card with no battle icons to get that +3 attack trigger from him. So I put 3 copies of Power Punch in the deck. And the next card that we'll look at that will also add to our damage is Reckless Charge. It's an action that says one of your characters gets +4 attack until end of turn. At the end of turn, do 3 damage to it. Again, another card that has a really great benefit, but it also has a downside. Well, that downside's not that big of a deal, again, because we are playing I Still Function, and Ransack likes to have damage on him. So it's actually not that big of a deal. Obviously, we're going to be playing this card on whomever is, prime at the time, but this is really good with Ransack. I went ahead and put 3 copies of Reckless Charge in the deck. And the last card is Supercharge. And this is an action that says one of your characters gets Bold 3 until end of turn. So again, flipping tons of cards is really great, especially in this type of an aggressive deck, where we're already flipping tons of cards. Why not flip more? But this basically reads the same as Power Punch and acts very similarly, but we're able to play both of those in the same turn. So, we're going to be flipping a ton of cards with Skywarp with that combination. I put 3 copies of Supercharge in the deck. So the next cards that we're going to look at are, serve more of a utility role or defensive role. And, we'll go ahead and take a look at those. The first one that we'll look at is going to help us try to stay alive a little bit longer, and that's Force Field. It's an upgrade armor that has a white icon, so we'll be flipping more cards if we flip these while we're defending or attacking. And it reads, if the upgraded character would take 5 or more attack damage, instead scrap this card and the upgraded character takes 4 attack damage. So, we're trying to win the damage race against other orange decks. This doesn't work too well against other blue decks because, they're not doing nearly as much damage. I mean, it may still come into play, but this is primarily to help us win the damage race against those orange decks. So I put 3 copies of Force Field in the deck. The next card, which is also an armor, but it's, serving a much different purpose in this deck, and that's Bashing Shield. It's an upgrade armor that has an orange and a green icon, so we can grab this while we're flipping it while we're battling. But when we put this on a character, we scrap an enemy armor. So, it does give us +1 armor, but we're not really looking at it from that perspective normally. There might be a situation where we think that we can, survive if we play this just as an armor, but, this is in here primarily because this is in the game. we want to try to win the damage race, and the less armor the opponent has, the better chance that we have of doing that. But because it does have a green icon, I just put 2 copies of Bashing Shield in the deck. And the next card that we have is going to help us, do some power plays. And that is Field Communicator. It's an upgrade utility that also has a white icon. And it reads, when you put this on a specialist, scrap the top card of your deck. You may play that card. And it also gives us +1 attack, which is pretty cool from a utility. But Skywarp in both modes is a specialist, and Wheeljack in alt mode is also a specialist. So we actually have 2 targets for this. But this is really going to help us out, making some power plays. It may have us, play an extra action or an extra weapon on our turn, which is really cool. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of Field Communicator in the deck. Now, the last 2 cards in the deck are what I call the necessary evils. They're cards that we have in the deck because of the icons rather than the actual card itself, but there might be a couple situations where we would actually use the card for what its intended purpose was. But the first card that we'll look at is Peace Through Tyranny. And it's an action with 2 orange icons that reads, you may KO one of your characters that has 6 stars or more. If you do, take an extra turn after this one. Now, there may be a situation where we would play this to take that extra turn, but the only time that I've actually played it in the few weeks that I've been playing this deck, I would play it when Ransack just attacked and I have I Still Function in my hand. Because the way that it would work in that situation is, I play Peace Through Tyranny, I KO Ransack, and do whatever I need to do and attack with Wheeljack. And then on my Peace Through Tyranny turn, I would play I Still Function on Ransack, bring him back, and then attack with Ransack. So that will actually help protect Skywarp after you play a Peace Through Tyranny turn, because we don't want the entire enemy team attacking into Skywarp. Our heavy hitters are Wheeljack and Ransack after he's I Still Functioned, but Skywarp is probably the most important character in the deck, so we don't want him to go down too quickly. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of Peace Through Tyranny in the deck, really simply because it has the 2 orange icons. And similarly, the other necessary evil is Improvised Shield. And it's an upgrade armor that has 2 orange icons, and it gives our character Tough 1. We have no blue in this deck. So the only character that we're going to be playing this on, if at all, will be on Skywarp. Because if he flips, a non-icon card while he's battling on defense, he gets +3 defense. Don't rely too heavily on this, though, because flipping 1 extra card is not really going to make a whole lot of difference, but, it does give us a little bit of extra chance. Okay, so those are all the Battle Eye cards for the main deck. So let's go ahead and look at the cards in the sideboard. Okay, so like I said earlier in the video, I went ahead and moved Insecticon Skrapnel to the sideboard. And the reason why I did that was because I just felt that Wheeljack was a little bit more versatile in the way that he performs well against aggressive decks and defensive decks, just simply because of the amount of damage he does. But unfortunately, Skrapnel doesn't really do well against those heavy defensive decks that don't really do much damage in return. They're only swinging for 3 or 4 damage anyway, so the damage mitigation of Skrapnel doesn't really perform well against those decks. But if you're going up against one of those hyper aggressive decks, that's when his ability really shines, and that's when you really should sideboard him in. So if you do sideboard in Skrapnel, you do have 2 stars that you can mess with. And the cards that I put in the sideboard for that are 2 copies of Bolt of Lightning. And this card is incredible. It's an action with no battle icon, so you can get it back with Skywarp. But it's an action that reads, do 3 damage to an enemy. This is basically 1 shall stand, 1 shall fall without having to deal 3 damage to your own guy, which is probably the reason why it has a star on it. I mean, this card is really great. And the reason why it's great is because, we may be attacking into a character that only has, 3 or less health remaining. And in an aggressive deck like this, we don't want to waste damage. We want to try to make sure that our damage is efficient and, knocking out characters when they're still fairly healthy. But if we have Bolt of Lightning in our hand, we can go ahead and take out that character that has 3 health or less so that we can attack into a different target and try to deal as much damage as possible there. But because I only have 2 stars available, I just put 2 copies of Bolt of Lightning into the sideboard. And the next card that we're going to look at is going to help us against those decks that use Battle Masters. Really any deck that uses a weapon to extreme benefit. And that is Enforcement Batons. And it's an upgrade weapon that has an orange and a green icon, so we can get these back when we're flipping during battling. But it reads, when you put this on a character, scrap an enemy weapon. And it also gives +1 damage. So, this is another weapon that we can have in the scrap pile for Wheeljack to make sure that he's online, basically. But this is, really in there to bring in against, Aimless and Lionizer and Fire Drive and the like. But there are also decks out there that, synergize around really powerful weapons. But because this does have a green icon and we only have 10 spots in the sideboard, I just put 2 copies of Enforcement Batons in the sideboard. Now the next card is going to help us with upgrades as well, primarily utilities, but it can be brought in against anything, and that is Ramming Speed. And it's an action that simply reads scrap an enemy upgrade. And I just put 2 copies in. Again, we only have 10 slots available in the sideboard for cards. And we already have cards in the main deck that will help us against armor. But if we do go up against those blue decks that, rely heavily on armor, we can bring these in, to double up on the amount of cards that we have that can take care of those armor. But this is really the only way that we can deal with utilities. And, if our opponent's playing W-5 Gyro Blaster, that really shuts down our offense, especially Wheeljack, since he, relies heavily on bold. But I went ahead and just put 2 copies of Ramming Speed in the sideboard. And speaking of which, I do have W-5 Gyro Blaster in the sideboard. And it's a utility that has no battle icon, so you can get it back with Skywarp. And it reads, when the upgraded character battles, each player can't flip more than 2 battle cards during this battle. And it does give +1 attack, which is pretty cool since it's on a utility. But this really hurts offensive decks or any deck that relies heavily on bold. If they're not flipping a ton of cards, they're not dealing nearly as much damage. So you can bring this in against, Lionizer decks or Wheeljack decks. Even some of the bold decks that are trying to capitalize on black icons. It works there too. But this can also be brought in against defensive decks if they're relying heavily on tough. I'm finding that it really doesn't work as well as I thought it was going to, but it does come into play a little bit. But because this has no battle icons and we can get it back with Skywarp, I just put 2 copies of Gyro Blaster in the deck. And the last 2 cards, which has a pretty cool interaction with Skywarp from Wave 2, is Hiding Spot. And I have 2 copies of Hiding Spot, and it's a secret action with a black icon. I know it's hard to see, but it does have a black icon. And when you reveal this on your opponent's turn, you reveal it after your opponent chooses an attacker, but before they choose a defender. So as soon as they choose which character they're going to be attacking with, you flip this, and when you reveal it, one of your characters gets stealth until end of turn. So this is really going to come in handy to make sure that they're not attacking into Skywarp when all of your guys are tapped, or if you just have Ransack and Wheeljack tapped, you can play this and protect Wheeljack if you want. But this is really cool in this deck because during one of the rules roundups, it was determined that when you play a secret action, you play it face down. And it was clarified that that is treated as playing an action with no battle icons. So if you play a secret action while Skywarp is in bot mode, he will get +3 attack for the rest of the turn. So that's a really cool interaction. But, you know, I only had 2 slots left. So Hiding Spot takes up the last 2 slots of my sideboard. So I feel that this sideboard works really well in general. It works pretty well in my local meta, which has a large variety of decks. But you know, you can change this based off what your local meta is. You know, if you're going up against a lot of blue decks, you might take out a couple of these cards, maybe the Gyro Blasters or whatever. But I just feel that this is a decent sideboard just in general. Okay, so that is the sideboard, and that is the deck. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed the video. I worked really hard on this one because obviously Skywarp's Lazarus is my pet deck. It's the deck that got me started on everything. You know, way back when, before I started making videos, the guys at Wreck and Rule played a version of Skywarp's Lazarus on one of their live streams. And, you know, I started getting messages from people saying, hey, what's in the deck? You know, do you make videos? And I was like, no, but why not? So I started making videos, and it's all because of Skywarp's Lazarus. So, you know, I really hope that you guys enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my Patreon account. And also, if you notice that this is the first video that I've used this playmat. And this is a custom playmat by Inked Gaming. I do have a link in the description of this video as well for that. And don't forget to use the promo code, and you'll get a discount. And most importantly, never forget, you can win if you dare. So take care now, guys.